Hello everyone, welcome back to the kitchen table. Today on the kitchen table, as promised, interview with the Civil Aviation Authority about the charging proposal for the drone registration scheme. Before we go any further, dry throat, cup of coffee. Cheers to you all. Right, so first of all, I want to thank Jonathan Nicholson, who's the Deputy Director of Communications for the Civil Aviation Authority, for agreeing to answer some of your questions. He very kindly invited us to go up to either Central London or Gatwick and do a face-to-face, but unfortunately I couldn't make it work with the diaries. So we decided to use some technology that we both are vaguely understanding of and do it remotely. We've done that. This was filmed on Wednesday afternoon, the 8th of May. And as promised, I took your questions. Thank you very much, those of you who put your questions in the comments below. I also had quite a few by private message, email, some bits and pieces on Twitter and various other avenues that have come to me. So thank you. We collated the sort of the ones that had the most sort of repeat answers, and one in particular that only one person asked, but I was really interested in the answer of, and we put them together. So we're going to go over that now, and I hope you find it useful. So Jonathan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's great that you're happy to answer some of the questions that our viewers have put in today. So thanks for making yourself available to us.
No, that's fine, of course.
Brilliant. So I think we should go, before we sort of hit into some of the hard questions that we got, perhaps for some people who, there did seem to be some people who weren't aware of the background, so perhaps you could just let us know how we got to this point where later on this year, compulsory registration for unmanned aircraft is going to come in.
Yeah, so it's a couple of years now since government did a big drone bill consultation, and at the end of that, so registration was one of the options in that, and at the end of that, they did a response document to all the views that came in, and said they were minded to do drone registration with a safety test as well, and that's what they announced, and early this year they formally said that's what they were going to do. And put into law earlier this year in what we call the air navigation order, which is all the rules of the air that everybody has to comply with, put into that as actual law that from the end of November 2019, anybody who operates a drone over 250 grams has to register as an operator, not the drones, and then separately anybody who flies a drone has to do an online safety test as well. So it's something that the government's been indicating for a good couple of years now that it's going to be doing, so plenty of advance warning. It's now come into law and into November, when it becomes effect. Sure.
Okay. Thank you. So ostensibly we're at the final hurdle or the final stages of a political process, and now it's the implementation of the law that was laid down.
Yeah. So the only thing, I think people might have got confused. The only thing that we're actually consulting on now is the charge that people pay for it. The fact that there will be a registration scheme, the fact that there'll be an online test for people who fly, that was decided by the Department for Transport some time ago.
Yeah, okay. So on to I think perhaps what's crystallised people into paying attention a bit more perhaps was that you did publish the consultation document on the pricing. And we had a lot of questions, as I suspect you were expecting, from people both within and outside the IT industry, along the lines of why does a fairly simple, to their understanding, database cost so much? Why does it have to be an annual charge rather than a one-off? How does your contractor arrive at their pricing models? A lot of questions around, I guess, justify that price.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things to say. It's not just a database of names, addresses and emails. So I know some countries in the world that might be what their register is. And justifiably, I think those countries have got a lot of flack from drone operators for just collecting that, and people saying, what is the use in just collecting a couple of emails? And I think there's little evidence that some countries have done much more than that and actually done anything with their database. It's a lot more than that. So It will verify people's ID automatically, so there's the standard government ID check that it will do as part of the process. It will do linked to a lot more systems in the future. So this is about future-proofing what we're delivering here, and that was one of the requirements the government set us. So once we get to something like the Unified Traffic Management System, where we see everything operating in the airspace automatically, autonomously, we get a lot more autonomous drone use in the UK. One of the requirements for that system will be knowing which drone is which and whose drone is whose. So this registration scheme that we're putting in place will absolutely be able to do that. So it's not just a database of names and addresses, it's future-proofing it. So that's a big part of what will happen. Other things, I mentioned the ID check. There is a fee every time that ID check takes place, so that has to be incorporated into the cost. Because the government paid for the initial system, it has to be purchased under the government digital system requirements. That then requires things like close to £1 million to be put aside for future system development. So that has to be included. The cost will also pay for drone education work going forwards. And it will also be the way we charge for everything. So in the UK, the CAA is a cost recovery agency. We're not directly a government body. In lots of other countries, the Civil Aviation Authority is part of the government and is funded by the taxpayer. In the UK, it's not like that. We're an absolute cost recovery agency. So people compare the charge that we've proposed with things like America or Ireland. Those are funded by the taxpayer. So every person in Ireland, whether or not they go anywhere near a drone, is helping to pay for their drone registration system. And everybody who flies on a US airliner is paying for the drone registration system. So the only other direct comparator for a drone scheme charges is Australia. They are a cost recovery agency like us, separate from government. They've literally just finished their consultation on drone charges, and they were looking at around 20 Australian dollars for a consumer user and about 180 Australian dollars for a commercial user. So, you know, we're not going, we think there's the same amount of work regardless of who you are, so we're not pretending to charge different things for different people, but our basic charge is pretty similar to what the Australians are proposing for a consumer user.
Okay, so that's interesting, because one of the questions that we also had a number of times was from existing commercial operators in the UK who've gone through their training and have proved their competence, and they hold a permission for commercial operations. One of the questions that we had was, okay, bearing in mind that they've done that, you know who they are, why can't they simply mark all of their equipment with their PFCO number or a number that they're given, and that should be enough? Why do they have to jump through more administration hoops and presumably add to the cost of what you're doing as well, when they've already shown their competency and you already hold their details?
Yes, so absolutely, we want to make it as simple as possible for commercial users, and in the future we'll look at unifying systems, so potentially bringing the commercial approvals and the registration into one thing. But it's really keen that, I think we're really keen that we do future-proof these systems. So it is about, in the future, if those commercial operators want to be part of that UTM, that their data and their details is in that system, not in some separate system that people can't cross-reference. It's also about making sure we comply with the future EASA requirements as well. So the new European rules that are coming in, it's about making sure that if they want to go and do a job in Germany or Italy or Spain, that the authorities there absolutely can access those information, see who they are, and making it easier for those operators to go and fly in those countries.
Okay, so that's an interesting point about an element of this, is that continuing European-wide aviation cooperation, irrespective of Brexit, and let's not go down that route for goodness sakes here, but That's an interesting point. Just coming back, one of the other questions that we did have about the costing, and one of the things that you mentioned was and it was quite interesting to see the breakdown where you've looked at here's the cost, here's the number of users that we estimate, therefore this is what we think. Was that a conservative estimate? In other words, are you or have you gone for as accurate as possible? In other words, presumably if more people register, then going forward this would be a cheaper process, but if fewer, potentially more expensive. How optimistic have you been, I guess, on the numbers of sign-ups?
So we've not been optimistic or pessimistic. We've been as accurate as we can be, but given the fact that nobody knows, and if people have, one of the questions we've asked in the consultation is if people have a better idea of the number of drones currently around in the UK, please tell us, because nobody has a very accurate figure that we've been able to ascertain. So manufacturers and retailers are very reticent to share information because of market sensitivities, etc. We don't really know, and I don't think anybody knows exactly how many drones are operational in the UK. There are absolutely sales figures, again, very difficult to get hold of because people won't release them. That doesn't mean to say those drones are still in use. So basically what we've done is the best guess that we can go for, which is things like look at how many are registered in America and Ireland, extrapolate that out to their population of countries, and then look at that percentage on the population in the UK, together with any figures we do have from retailers or anybody that's willing to share information with us. So it is a best guess, and that's why we've been absolutely clear that, you know, we will adjust that figure in the future based on uptake. And absolutely, if we see more people register than we thought, then we'll look at putting the price down or moving it to every 3 years rather than every year. There's a number of options we can look at in the future.
Okay. So thank you. We had a number of comments from people who are already members of other organisations around model flying, specifically or most prevalently from the BMFA, but I guess it could be other organisational membership bodies. And that question was, which I guess you've kind of maybe perhaps covered in the previous answer, but again, because as part of the BMFA membership, there's an element of collecting your details. You could already register your drones through them. Certain people will have gone through BMFA training and competencies. Is there a reason that the BMFA or you couldn't use other bodies' membership lists to allow that existing bit of data to form part of your registration scheme?
So right back again, government decision. So right back when the government first came back with its response to the consultations on registration as part of the bigger drone bill, they actually said that they didn't think that a mass kind of location of using BMFA members during using their database actually met the government requirements. So they kind of ruled that out at a very early stage before they even asked us to look at developing the system. What they and we have said is there's a possibility for individual clubs, I think, to look at taking on the responsibility for their members. So we're still talking to BMFA. I think the government are engaging with them as well to see what the art of the possible is. So we want to make it work for people, but it does need to be a useful system, something that in the future, as I say, feeds into that bigger air traffic picture. It's not just a list of names and addresses and emails, it's more than that. But absolutely exploring with BMFA and others exactly what is the art of the possible, as long as it meets the government need.
Sure. Thank you. I think the next question I can summarise for most people as what's in it for me. And I think you gave some examples, which again was perhaps useful in the consultation document of the pricing for other permissions in inverted commas, like course fishing and others. And we've had the comments, quite a lot of them, that well, if you get yourself a fishing license or a driving license or other sort of permits, it allows you to do something that otherwise people aren't able to do. There doesn't seem to be any element in this scheme of okay, you are registered and competent, therefore you will have access to this airspace or these areas. A lot of people have expressed concerns about their local authority just slapping blanket bans on their their parks or the National Trust, even for people who would be doing all the right things. Is there going to be scope for people who do the thing that the law says and register to get a benefit out of it?
Well, certainly from an airspace perspective, I mean, a drone user can fly probably in more airspace than some private pilots can fly in at the moment. So it's not about access to airspace, although coming back to that UTM thing in the future, it may allow more access. Certainly for me, I think the amount of emails and questions I get every week from people saying, I was flying in the park and someone came up to me and said, you know, what right have you got to fly here? Or, you know, do you have permission to fly here? Or are you qualified, etc. I think having that registration certificate or that something, you know, the piece of paper that you could print off to show you've passed the online test, for me, that's something that, you know, for all of those people, they could carry with them electronically or in paper form and be able to show to people and say, look, I am qualified, I am registered, I have passed all the hurdles, I know what I'm doing. Therefore, let me fly here. I'm perfectly able to fly here. And also coming back to the point of people flying abroad, when the EASA regs come in, we will have a level playing field throughout Europe. We'll have one set of regs. Other countries will want to see your registration and the fact that you've passed the competency in the UK. And again, you know, being stopped by a Spanish policeman in Mallorca is something I've had put to me by various drone users over the years, and you know, being able to show them all your UK certification as far as your approval and your registration will undoubtedly help in those situations.
Okay. We've had several people comment that they have a suspicion that this might actively sort of discourage people from recreational flying of drones. There might be a few people that, oh, for goodness sakes, you know, that's it, I can't be bothered. And not just drones, of course. This encompasses any unmanned vehicle, so it's remote control aeroplanes, foam gliders, whatever you're throwing around. But as you said, though, there are plenty of places that, you know, everyone can fly and fly perfectly legally, safely, appropriately. But there is an education piece as well that's maybe for landowners and people who control open spaces, that, you know, we're not all the bad guys. Is there any element of this that where the CAA can help to actually be promoting the positive aspects, the good guys, the people who are not only using it commercially, but also the vast majority of the hobbyists who are not out to cause any problems, who are going to, you know, even begrudgingly jump through all the hoops because they enjoy what they're doing? Is there a side of this equation, or is there anything that the CAA can do to help sort of promote that people who are on the register are the good guys, and we shouldn't always be hit over the head with whatever local bylaws or not in my backyard?
Yes, so I mean, absolutely. There's a lot we can do to help, you know, educate all sides, if you like, including landowners, the general public, that, you know, if people have passed the test, are registered, then they know what they're doing, and there's no reason why they can't do what they do if they're meeting the requirements. I think I'd also look at it from the fact of, you know, if it's something I'm really passionate about, then doing a short online test and paying a relatively small fee is something I would put up with. You know, I would do so I could continue doing what my passion or my hobby is. And we will absolutely make the test appropriate. So we're really keen that we don't give people the excuse or the reason to not do the test. It needs to be as appropriate for a teenager who flies a drone once every 6 months in their local park as it does for somebody who flies their drone every week and is an avid, you know, photographer or whatever. So it needs to be pitched right, and it will be something that we will make sure is the right length, the right language, the right number of questions, so it doesn't put people off. It is absolutely doable, and you know, we're talking at the moment, it's still to be confirmed because it's out to consultation, but you know, something that if I went out tonight in London would be 3 pints of beer, if you like. So, you know, whatever one of my hobbies is, drumming, football, drones, whatever, if someone said to me I had to do that every year to be able to do that hobby, okay, I'll do it, because I want to carry on with my hobby.
Thank you. moving on to a slightly more technical question, it may be that a little bit of confusion was caused for some by the infographic here about the actual registration process. And I think there's been a slight bit of confusion about responsible operator versus pilot. We had questions about, look, do I need to register? Do I need to do both kind of registration tasks if I own and fly one drone? What about I've bought one for my kid who is 14? What about if I have 50 drones and other people occasionally fly them in like a park meetup or something like that? Can you just sort of clarify a little bit about how many times you're going to have to do this process if you're the most users, you have one or two drones and they're yours, and you maybe have one or two people that you let fly them? Are you going to have to do two sets of registrations and tasks? How is that going to work?
So thing to remember is it's a register of operators, not of drones. So it doesn't matter how many drones you have, you only need to register once. But you need to register if you are responsible for a drone. Doesn't mean to say you fly one. I mean, in most cases, most of the people we talk to and your audience or whatever, they're going to be flying the drone that they're responsible for, but it's not always the case. So say, for example, you are chief financial officer of a major company and you have 2,000 drones. You would potentially be the responsible person in that company for your drone operation and would need to register, but you might go nowhere near those drones and never fly them. You might employ 50 people who are drone pilots. So they would go and do the free online test to make sure they knew the basic rules about flying drones, but they wouldn't need to actually register as an operator unless, for example, they had other drones that they used for fun when they weren't at work. So very important to distinguish between the two. The register is a register of operators. If you're also flying a drone, then you need to do the separate free online test and education piece, which we will make quite simple and straightforward for people. So parent situation, if you're a parent, then yes, if your kid has a drone, they're under 18, you need to register yourself and be the responsible person for that drone. The child needs to go and do the online test, the free online test.
Is there an age limit below which you're going to say, I mean, obviously there's an age of responsibility in law for criminal actions, but I guess what we're saying is it's the operator, the owner, if you like, who's going to be responsible for anybody under 18 who's causing a problem. But is there, I mean, what happens if I let my 8-year-old fly one? Are you going to put a lower limit on it, or is it just blanket? If you fly a drone, you should do this test.
Yeah, so no limit on flying, limit on operator. Yeah, because absolutely, as you say, the operator is the person responsible. So if you let someone else fly your drone, you are responsible for that drone. They would have to pass the online test first, even if they only fly it once, but you are the responsible operator, owner of that drone. So you both have shared responsibilities, but as the operator, that's what you are.
Interesting question. I referred to this in my introduction. This was a question that was only answered once, but it was an interesting one. It's probably unfair to throw it at you, but I'm going to anyway. Somebody quite rightly, I believe, unless I've got this wrong, mentioned that there's no registration or competency test currently required to fly, for example, a paramotor.